find the nuances for what the new movement is in our society and where we all sit, whether it's criminal justice reform, whether it's Black Lives Matter, whether it's all those movements that have now occurred inside our community. It's now the time to know where we sit, how we should sit, who is inviting us to the table, and are we in a new circumstance? This evening, we want to talk about those reforms, those affected, the civil rights that have been affected by so many, those abuses that are existing right now. So, I want to invite Christian Paget onto the show now. She will join me and we will begin to describe where we are as it relates to sitting at the table. Good evening.
Hey, let me start my video. All right, can everybody hear me?
We can hear you. I can hear you. I don't know about the rest of the world. I would assume that they can. Welcome to Rolling Out, Seat at the Table.
Hello, it's wonderful to be here. Thank you for the invite.
No, it's our pleasure. We really want to know where individuals are seating at the table of all of the various movements based on this uprising. Would like you to share. Hey, Jasmine, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Okay. Well, why don't you and Jasmine, we'll start with you. Everyone introduce themselves to the audience here at Seat at the Table, and we can get started. I'm excited about this moment.
All right, so first of all, let me say thank you again to Rolling Out. For so long, we've not been able to really tell the stories of what's going on. And so thank God for media outlets such as Rolling Out, establishing that there is going to be a platform so that these stories can get out. So I am attorney Jasmine Crockett. I am a civil rights lawyer. I'm licensed in Texas, Arkansas, and in multiple federal courts. And so what I do a lot of times is I deal with law enforcement as they're using excessive force on people. Usually it's resulting in death or something near death. Unfortunately, with everything that's going on with George Floyd, things really got out of hand here in Dallas. And so I'll kick it over to Christian in a second because she unfortunately was one of those that was victimized by the very police that are supposed to serve and protect. And she was literally out there trying to exercise her First Amendment right. And instead, her rights were completely trampled upon. And she'll tell you more about that.
Well, I think we're going to talk. I look forward to hearing what she has to say. And clearly, I want to make sure that we all talk about our seats because it is definitely a moving table at this moment as it relates to the reforms that are going to happen. Christian?
Yes, so my name is Kristen Paget. By trade, I'm actually in technology sales. I do have a degree from the University of Texas in Dallas in marketing. And yeah, just like Jasmine said, I was protesting for George Floyd and was arrested in the process of doing that. Our city had imposed a curfew in order to essentially trample on our rights to freedom of speech and to the First Amendment right? And so that's the truncated version of what happened. Now, this is just an intro. I will swing it back to you and let you if you have any specific questions or if you just want me to kind of go through and then walk you through my experience. But I will swing it back to you, Munson, and then follow your lead on that.
Well, it's nice of you to swing it back to me, but I really want to know what motivated you to even get started. What about George Floyd? What about America needs to change? Why don't you share that with me right now?
That is such a good question, and I'm really glad you asked it. I really didn't think I was gonna tell my story. I just thought I was going to talk about.
I see a lot of people, but I don't see a lot of white people. So I'm always excited, and I live in Atlanta, so I have a whole different perspective than Dallas. And obviously, I definitely understand Plano and the culture, but I'm always motivated to understand what people are defining as allies and what the motivation is. So, and I'm sure our audience wants to know. So
absolutely. So this is actually going to start a few years back. I'm originally from here. So I'm originally from Fort Worth, so the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Born and raised. I moved to Dallas about 10 years ago. And I had the privilege of growing up in a very multicultural neighborhood, a very middle high income area in far north Fort Worth, almost Keller. And so I did have exposure to multiple different cultures growing up. So I get to Dallas and I start realizing that there's a really big issue here with racism. So big that like I can't walk down the street with a Black person without getting looked at crazy. I was ostracized in high school for being friends with Black people, for dating Black people. I was ostracized by white people growing up. I've been called names. I've been attacked for it by other white men. And that's like a whole nother story for a whole nother day. But when I graduated college, I was starting to get into politics because, you know, they don't really tell us how important that is growing up, right? They really don't embed in you your civic duty. And I think there's a reason for that, right? Because they want you to stay asleep and they want you to let them make the choices for you. And so this is around the time that Michael Brown got shot. So I was livid. Having dated many Black men, having many Black male friends, platonic, having many Black female friends, platonic, realizing like this is an issue that affects people I care for and I love. And I decided to actually run for office. The same thing Jasmine Crockett is doing, is running for office to try to make these changes. And I actually was living in Frisco, so a far north Dallas suburb, you could say. Very conservative. It's not as much conservative anymore. They've actually been doing a wonderful job up there with the Democratic Party, moving it away from the conservative ideologies. It's a little bit more purple now. But back then, I did not win my race, but I did run as a Democrat, the same similar seat that Jasmine Crockett is running for right now. And I did it because of what was happening in the public eye with racism and the kind of the new Jim Crow, right, and the new civil rights movement that was happening. But I got a little bit of a wake-up call. This is my first ever time running for office. I got a wake-up call, and I found out that you cannot go into these very Caucasian neighborhoods and you know, Black Lives Matter and criminal justice reform and all of these things that really need to change and actually get elected. And so Jasmine Crockett has a really wonderful privilege where she is in a district where the majority of people that are in this district are actually being affected by these bad laws that we've enacted many, many years ago, right? These are laws that have been in place for decades, if not a century at this point, right? And so she's in a position to actually get elected on these platforms and actually make changes. And so that's really why I support her, because she's just, it's a perfect storm in her district to be able to do this. Whereas I tried and, you know, it just wasn't going to work out, right? Just because of the district and where it was at. Which is actually part of the reason I moved a little bit closer to Dallas. So that way later in life, right, I might be able to do the same thing again. But that is actually how I got here today, which is just being politically active, being an activist, trying to get in where I fit in, so to speak, and taking others' leaders like Jasmine Crockett, right? And seeing what is she doing? What is this movement really about? How can I help? Because it's not my movement. But it is the movement of people I care for deeply and love deeply.
So it either is or isn't your movement. So we're going to help you there.
So it is my movement in the sense that I'm 100% here for it, but I don't want to, how do you say, make it about me and be like, me, this is me. You know, I like you said at the very beginning, is I want to be an ally. I don't want to take away, but I want to contribute. And so, which is part of the reason why I'm having this conversation, right?
And I'm very, very light on, I have no experiences like you're describing, so I understand. I want to be really plain. When you think about this, Ms. Crockett, what were you anticipating when you saw this uprising? Because obviously you as a change agent in the community had to see something. And I think all of us saw something different. Still not certain why my dear sister has decided to run out, but we're going to get back to her. What are you seeing as it relates to police reform that need to be on the agenda or at the seat at the table as it relates to change?
Yeah, so a couple of things. Number one, for quite some time, we've had these talking points from politicians. Everybody runs and they say, I'm here for criminal justice reform. And that helps them out, especially with the Black vote, because Black people have been saying for the longest, our criminal justice system does not work for us. It works against us. And so every time somebody runs for office, they say that, but they don't define it. There's a lack of actual substance behind what they're saying. And as a criminal defense and civil rights lawyer, I pretty much got frustrated. I started a year ago running for office, and I was telling people then, I said, we're in the midst of a modern day civil rights movement. And people were like, ah. And then, you know, Kristen said it, my district is majority minority. It's about 40% Black, 40% Hispanic, and 20% white. So they were like, well, you can't take that message into the 20%. Like, you can't. And I said, so here's the deal. I'm Black every single day of my life, right? And I'm educated, okay? But at the end of the day, they need to know who I'm going to be down in Austin. And the fact is, we don't have a very strong voice in the state of Texas. This is why Texas is one of the leading states when it comes to mass incarceration. We only have a little less than 10% of our legislature being represented by Black folk. I can guarantee you that there are more than 10% Black folk in the state of Texas. And our legislature only pays $7,200 a year. So you tell me how many everyday people can get to Austin and make sure that laws make sense for everybody. We don't have that many, right? And so for me, I've been out in the streets, I've marched, and I've had to represent people. So one of the cases, one of our national cases, my former law partner is Lee Merritt, which Lee Merritt is seen everywhere. He's my fraternity brother. And honestly, this is how we came together, was in the midst of a bunch of kind of civil rights issues that were going on. But there's usually kind of this criminal side of it too. And Lee definitely did not have a criminal background whatsoever. And so in seeing this happening, we would get a hashtag and then we would march. We would get a hashtag and then we would march. And I said, yo, like something has to change, because what we do is we get a hashtag, we march, and somebody may be running for office at that time and it sounds good, it feels good. And then we're left looking like, nothing changed, right? And so I said, listen, with every movement, everybody has a role to play. And I can't say that I'm best as a foot soldier. Doesn't mean that I won't get out in the streets and march, because I will, but that's not where I'm best situated. I've also had to deal with cases being dismissed because of qualified immunity, right? So I'm like, wait a minute, you know, fighting one case at a time isn't really getting it done for the movement either. And so I said, there are people that sacrifice so that I could be who I am today. And there have to be people that are going to sacrifice to make sure that tomorrow is better for those coming behind us. So for me, it was a matter of, we need to change the laws. And that's not what, I mean, Dallas has more Black judges than any other county in the country, right? So the epitome for a lot of Black folk is, let's become a judge, or even maybe even go to the federal level in some way. But we don't ever talk about the legislature, really. Like, the glorious job is the judicial job. And so I said, nope, this is where I need to be. I need to make sure that we are changing laws, and I need to define for people what it looks like to have real criminal justice reform, what it looks like to deal with police brutality issues. And so none of this functions in a vacuum. You can't say, if we put this one thing in place, now everything's going to be fixed. That's
so what
not what it is.
First two police reform actions, your first two?
Yeah, so one thing that I want to push for is I want to push for a requirement that all law enforcement officers actually have insurance. So in the state of Texas and in most states, you're required to have car insurance. We've got officers that are walking around with a deadly weapon on their hip. And a lot of times when an officer actually is prosecuted, which doesn't happen very often, it usually lets the city off the hook. And so the city is where the money is. So number one, you've got officers that are walking around killing people. For instance, Botham Jean out of Dallas. He actually lived, died, and worshiped in my district. Botham's family is left kind of holding the bag because Amber Geiger was convicted and the federal court said, oh, well, we're going to let the city of Dallas out. And obviously there's no moral compass when it comes to the government, right? And they're not a for-profit agency. So it's not like you can say, oh, well, we're not going to pay our taxes. You can do that if you want to, but they're going to take your house, right? So they're going to get their money no matter what. So you can't approach them the same way that you would approach, say, the McDonald's Corporation. So it does two things. If they are required to have insurance policies on these officers, number one, when you have an Amber Geiger who ends up going off to prison, we know that that family will be compensated in some way. There's no amount of money that will ever bring both of them back, but we know that that family will get something. In addition to that, for all of y'all that have children and you have them on your insurance and they're terrible drivers, what happens when they get tickets? Anytime there's an incident as it relates to a person who has insurance, their premiums go up. So this is one way for us to start ridding our departments of these bad actors. Because right now it's kind of like, usually the police union protects them, saves them from anything. But at the end of the day, if you start costing too much money to these departments, then they may go ahead and get rid of you. So that's kind of a backdoor way of getting somewhere. I also want to make sure, I'm a big mental health advocate, especially in today's times. I was on the Metro Care Board, which is the largest mental health provider of mental health services in North Texas. And for me, it doesn't really make sense that we anticipate that when somebody goes off to war internationally, that they'll come back and we need to check on their mind. But when we're dealing with law enforcement officers domestically, we don't anticipate that there's going to be any issues. So what happens is most agencies say, hey, we're going to evaluate your mind when you come in and make sure you're all right. But they never go back and check. And so you've got these people that are going through the very same things that sometimes drive the average individual to the edge, right? Whether it's divorce, whether it's marital problems, whatever it is that's going on, we see a high incidence of suicide and murder-suicide amongst officers. And so I don't want an officer who's reeling out on the streets carrying a gun. I want to make sure that we are actually putting some money into making sure that we are doing routine checks as relates to the mental health of these officers, because they are walking around and they are dangerous.
So you were at a rally protesting and you saw an ad for Jasmine and you just decided to call her and have a kumbaya moment. Is that what happened, Christian?
Not exactly, no. So what had happened was, I mentioned earlier that I'm an activist in Dallas, and I was actually my first, I think, like face-to-face with Jasmine. I was helping out on another campaign for a local election in Dallas, and I was technically managing that campaign, and actually was at the MLK parade. So we were lining up to go walk through at the MLK parade here in Dallas. And I don't know, Jasmine and I just clicked. We were like, hey, we like each other. And so, so I, friends on Facebook, and we follow each other. And I had found out that she was volunteering her services for protesters. And so on this particular day, I knew that tensions were high in Dallas, right, because this curfew had just come out. But I also knew that that was wrong. So I was like, definitely going out today. I was like, they're not going to silence me or anybody else. And so I wrote her number on my arm, just kind of, it's just like, a practice that protesters should do every time they go out to a protest is write your emergency numbers. So I had my boss's number on my arm, and then I had Jasmine Crockett's number on my arm. And so I called my father, was like, hey, Dad, call this number, to get her to help me out there. And then, just called her. And then
you got arrested?
Yeah, so I'll walk you guys through that. So long story short, it was honestly me and 3 other people, so there's 4 of us total. We showed up to a scheduled protest at the Dallas Police Headquarters. The protest was organized, I think it was by a civil rights group here in Dallas that's very popular. And we were a little bit late, and we showed up and actually ended up, there's some other scragglers there too. And so we actually, 6 of us ended up walking to the headquarters, and we walked up there and there was like 50 police and like riot gear, but nobody else. So all those protesters that were there, they had actually basically been shifted over to the Margaret Hunt Hill Bridge. I did not get that memo. So we kind of walked into it, so to speak. And we were there and started protesting, and they scooped us up. And they like swarmed on us. I actually was Facebook living it. It was on national news and everything because there were so many news outlets there. And they ended up arresting all 6 of us. They put us on a paddy wagon out in almost 100-degree heat, and they left us there for 45 minutes to an hour in the heat in this metal box. And then they took us to some like warehouse that was not a police station. It was not the jailhouse. It was a warehouse. And they took our temperatures because of COVID. Mine was 101 degrees, and then a comrade of mine that was with me, his was 108 degrees when he got out of the paddy wagon. That's how long they kept us in there. They were cooking us as a way of torturing us for standing up, for our rights, but standing against them. And so, in my opinion, that's cruel and unusual, and that's a violation of the 5th Amendment, or 4th Amendment. And that's just one piece of it, right? And you asked, Jasmine, what are some of the issues with the criminal justice system? And one of the things that were stuck out vividly to me was that one of the foundations, one of the tenets and pillars of our society is that all men are innocent until proven guilty. But that is not how you get treated. So you go in being treated like a criminal, regardless of why they picked you up. It didn't matter if they picked us up because we got a curfew ticket, right? I was technically in violation of the curfew according to them, right? So literally all I was getting was a curfew ticket. I got arrested for that, but I was treated miserably. In fact, I was thrown into a drunk tank when I got into the general area where they hold you for 24 hours until they let you go, because I was questioning this woman having us drink off of a public water fountain during COVID, when we were all wearing masks to prevent the transmission of, right? So they throw me into a drunk tank where this woman had defecated and wiped it all over the walls. And there was another protester in there. And they had left her in there with this woman and the defecation on the walls as a form of torture, to torture her, because she would not let up. Like, she was calling out all of their behaviors and how wrong they were. And she was like, Black Lives Matter the whole time, right? And they didn't like that. So they left her in there with that. And then I get in there and they left me in there too. And then when she leaves, right, Jasmine actually came and got her out before she knew I was in there. And then almost about 30 minutes to 45 minutes after that woman leaves, they come and clean it. And it's because they knew that it was there, that they were leaving it there to torture this woman, this protester. And so those are just some of the little injustices that I noticed this is my first time, being in jail, not as a visitor to somebody in jail, but on the other side of the wall. And it's atrocious. It's completely
We're going to come back to that because we have been joined and welcome. We've been joined by Brandon, whose speaker is muted, so we wouldn't be able to hear him if he said something. So Brandon, if you'd be so kind to unmute your speaker. Why did you elect Attorney Crockett to represent individuals? Yes, sir, we can hear you now. why did you elect to represent those individuals who literally were part of this uprising?
Yeah, so this wasn't the first time. So as a civil rights lawyer, there's always marches. But for me, I said, what can I do best for the movement? And for me, it was make sure that I volunteer my services. And when Botham Jean was killed, there's a group that they refer to as the Dallas Nine that were arrested out at the Cowboy Stadium. And so I put together a team of lawyers at that point in time to assist them because they were being charged with some bogus cases as well. And so to me, this was no different. It's a part of kind of being prepared, is making sure that there are lawyers that are willing to assist protesters pro bono. The difference this time was that I sent out a tweet in which it was seen almost 1 million times. And that I was contacted by a little bit more than 400 people because they were either being arrested or there was a threat of arrest. So I never anticipated that it would grow into kind of this huge thing. You know, we didn't know with George Floyd that this was going to be different, that this was something that was going to go on for days and days and days, and that we didn't know how each government would respond. Some of them responded by...
When you see Brandon, how did the two of you come together?
So as it relates to Brandon, Brandon was actually in the hospital when I was contacted. His father reached out to me and basically said, hey, your number was out, because as Kristen said, my cell phone number was written on almost everybody's arm that was protesting. Like, they were handing out cards, they were doing all kinds of stuff. So his dad was originally out of Louisiana, out of Shreveport. So he had come to Dallas, and basically people were like, you probably need to call this lawyer because that's who everybody's calling. So his dad texted me and said, hey, my son's eye was shot out by the police. We need help. And I was like, what? And at that time, you know, I hadn't heard of this particular incident. And so it wasn't until Brandon was released from the hospital that I physically met him in person. His mother and his father communicated with myself and Daryl Washington, my co-counsel on his case. And then we ultimately finally saw Brandon when they finally released him from the hospital on his 26th birthday.
So Brandon, what made you participate in the uprising?
I mean, I really, at first, I wasn't, how you want to say it? I can't get it out. Participating. I just so happened walked up on it. I was leaving the dog park, and I just so happened to walked up on it, and I just happened to seen the laws just standing there with their shields, and I so happened to get shot.
Wow.
Yeah.
I wasn't doing anything. Once I seen the laws, I just stopped and paused. Then after that, a couple minutes later, that's when I heard a loud noise, boom. And that's when I noticed that I seen all the blood. That's when I noticed that I got shot.
So you were shot with a what?
Rubber bullet.
So I'm not putting a title on it. I'm just using projectile other than an actual bullet. Because there were a number of law enforcement agencies there. And we know it was DPD, and DPD is playing games about what it was that they were shooting. But we know it was DPD because we have video footage. But we've not recovered the actual projectile that hit them. But they were the only law enforcement agency that was around.
How has your life changed, Brandon?
It really changed my life. Like, I go back to my pictures and just look at them like they changed something. Like they took something from me. They took my eye, and they messed my whole left side up. My jaw was twisted. I got metal plates and metal screws.
And that's something that can't be replaced.
No, sir.
So when you think of that, how do you feel?
Sometimes I feel down. At the time, like sometimes I just don't want to deal with it. Like
Sorry.
I like to deal with
Just share, are you getting any, and at any moment, any Crockett, you can jump in, but are you getting any medical counseling given that this is a part of grief, given that you've lost something that you can't?
Yeah, I see a counselor.
Yeah, you know, it's so frustrating, right? Like just looking at the fact that we're in 2020 and before I was born, these marches were going on. And that's why for me it was, okay, I gotta do more than march. I gotta do something different because we've been marching for so long, yet we're still seeing these injustices and they may be exacerbated at this point in time. I mean, you look at what happened to Kristen, and for law enforcement, they thought, okay, let's just go ahead and lock up all these white people, like these allies. Like, let's give them a taste of what it is to go out there and say that we're going to march for Black lives. And you wouldn't believe how long it was taking me to just get somebody out. Like, they weren't booking them in. So their bodies were physically there, but they would not do their paperwork so that I could go ahead and get them out. It was absolutely ridiculous. And so here it is that I'm sure Kristen has heard stories. You know, people have said things, but sometimes going through it can change your entire perspective. And so literally for her and so many others, it only strengthened their resolve. And once they realized that they could not bully the entire city of Dallas into sitting down, they finally backed off. And a number of people have had their cases dismissed already. There's still a number of other cases that I still have to work to get dismissed. We've got to expunge records. Like it's this huge mess, and it's really for no reason. And what's so frustrating is that in the city of Dallas, we have the first Black female chief of police.
Well, you know, I know.
I'm sorry?
You know, I'm aware of that. She's been on the show.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's a, I think the entire movement, Brandon, because I want the community to understand that there's a ton of sacrifice that happens during this moment. Your life's been altered. I don't know that anyone planned for what we all are experiencing. But if you were able to speak to an audience of young people who just happened on the uprising, how would you describe to them, Brandon, how your life has been altered forever?
I mean, I just tell them that life is too short to be out here fighting each other too at the same time. Fighting each other. Like people say Black Lives Matter, but what are we doing to ourselves though at that? You know what I'm saying? We killing each other. So we really basically helping them out. So I mean, I just tell them like, hey, tell them just stay in school, do your homework, listen to your elders, get your education, you know, just stay out the streets, find you something better to do than being in the streets out there protesting though, because you will be shot though. Like
You will be shot. I'm not sure that's. I'm for the hope. I'm really. I know things are changing. I'm listening to Attorney Crockett. I really am sad that this uprising cost you your eye and the trauma. You know, just the expression. Attorney Crockett, you see Brandon, which my heart is totally broken at this moment. Brandon, we love you. Know that your sacrifice, because I see it definitely as a sacrifice as part of the movement. Attorney Crockett, what do you see when you see Brandon and the circumstances that he'll have to live with for the rest of his life?
Yeah, you know, I can imagine, you know, when I saw him and it was his 26th birthday, I couldn't help but to think, like, what was I doing when I was 26, right? And thinking about the basic things that are now altered, right? You know, we don't drive with one eye, right? Like basic things that like we take for granted so often. Here it is. It's not like he's, 70 years old. Not to say that it would be warranted if he were 70 years old, but his life is just beginning, and to permanently be maimed and become disabled, and then have a police department that is not doing their part and not doing everything that they can to make sure that the person responsible is held accountable. It only strengthens my resolve. Just like those that have been arrested and now they better understand, it only strengthens my resolve that something has to change, and it has to change now. And I can't wait on somebody else to do it. I got to do it for myself, and I got to do it for those coming behind me, like Brandon. This never should have happened. And I'm fearful that it can happen again, because their excuse is, well, that's not our policy. Our policy isn't to shoot at somebody's face, it's to shoot at the ground. But the reality is that policy was violated because his face wasn't on the ground. But we're not holding anybody accountable. So I'm tired of lip service. I'm tired of people saying, well, here, we've got these policies. We don't follow them, but that's okay. Like, no. So let me just change the laws and outlaw this, because you wouldn't treat people overseas this way. You wouldn't be allowed, if we went into another country, you would not be allowed to treat those in that country in this way. There was no law that he was allegedly violating. And then to not only do it, but to leave him there bleeding. To have protesters be the ones that are trying to load him in fact, they did load him into a car in an effort to get him to the hospital, because the same law enforcement that caused this damage, that could have very well killed him because he was bleeding out profusely, they didn't let the ambulance through. The ambulance that they didn't call, protesters called. So I'm like, so not only did you do this, but you had no remorse. So when people march and say Black Lives Matter, they have to do it because they're looking at somebody like Brandon Sainz, who would not be here if it were up to DPD. He wouldn't be here but for those protesters that were by his side and made sure he was taken care of.
Brandon, now that your life has been altered in the way that it has, you had a message for young people. What is your relationship like? How do you feel about the police today?
I mean, I feel about today, man, I don't feel no different about them. I mean, they still human beings just like I am. It just, they got a badge.
Beautiful brother. Beautiful brother. Your heart is uplifts me. Just want you to know that you love. I'm sure that Attorney Crockett and you will continue to seek justice. So I appreciate you coming to the table. But I don't want to think deaf ears. And I'm glad Attorney Crockett is, but I want the community to see the cause and the price. And I'm not just focused, obviously, on DPD. I'm really going to focus on the sacrifice that you made with your eye. And I hope that you continue to have the type of hope and love in your heart that I hear you have. And I'm glad you got a little fireball with you there to support you. Christian, it was great to meet you. I am, glad you got to experience the inside. So that's new and different. I don't think anybody, I'm not saying any people in our society are prepared for what we have continued to experience. I think the individuals like you, are seeing something Attorney Crockett probably heard of, and our entire community for 400 years, plus, and worse, when there were no cell phones and you couldn't make any calls and you didn't live to make a call, or we got a Sandra Bland where all of a sudden it's just an imaginary lynching none of us can ever will know the truth about. but here's a happy job. So really appreciate the sacrifice that all of you are making to describe and what it is. Attorney Crockett, we've got to circle back again. Brandon, check in with us if you would, a little later, because I really want to know where your heart's at. Just to hear you motivated. Definitely continue with counseling. This is totally mental health month. Your mental has to be strong, but don't lose yourself. Know that you're loved and your family loves you. I want to thank you all for coming to Rolling Out a Seat at the Table. Attorney Crockett, as we get closer to your race, let's make sure we connect. Brandon, you commit to staying in touch?
Yes, sir.
All right. So we'll circle back. Christian, welcome to the movement. I have a few more questions to ask you, but just not on this show. We're going to circle back with you too. So I
Perfect.
thank you all for coming, and love and respect to you. And we know that you are surrounded by professional counsel, Brandon, so I'm sure they'll keep that forward. Your parents put a lot into you as well, so I see that too. So do my best, if you would, Brandon, because they've done a great job. Thanks so much for all of you coming to Rolling Out a Seat at the Table, and we'll see you real soon.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. For all of you out there, just know that there's a sacrifice in every movement, and that there is tons of impact and lives that will be altered. So this is a very serious thing. There will be continued sacrifice that many of us will make. There'll be those who are affected who will, for the rest of their lives, journey through and be reminded daily of this protest, like the young man Brandon. I hope that you see what it is that being near social change and this uprising, and those who are sacrificing like Brandon, just to be around, be close, be in the street, making a difference. I want to know exactly how you feel about this. Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Thinking of the changes that are occurring in the lives of so many, we often think of where and how Sandra Bland was treated. We often think of Mike Brown, Trayvon Martin, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and those who gave the ultimate sacrifice for our uprising. It's almost unconscionable that you're not participating in some form. It is very important that we all see that we are the difference, and keeping a voice of our elders, a voice of our ancestors, a voice of hope. Each of us is making a sacrifice as we at least approach being heard. When we think about the changes during this pandemic, we know that our protests must continue in spite of a virus that will not relentlessly give up. It is holding on, and many of us need to be careful as we move through the city, as we move through protest, and not be dissuaded from addressing the injustices, both in the street and out, inside our society. We want to move forward each and every day at the seat of the table to give you a perspective of those who want economic, judicial, health change for our community and the world. We really want to make a difference. There are those who are being creatives and bringing new voices to our community. They too are bringing perspective to a seat at the table. Joining me tonight is David. Are you there, David? Hey, let's see him. Come on up. Turn on your camera.
Hey, sir, how you doing?
Come on, man. You see what it is. I'm having a wonderful time. Thanks for asking. Welcome to A Seat at the Table.
Thank you, thank you, thank you for having me.
David Justice.
David Joseph.
Joseph. I thought it was Justice.
I guess you could. I stand for justice. I definitely do.
There we go. Now it's working.
Look like y'all share the same last name. Is that a coincidence?
We're brothers.
We are all brothers. That is true. So, what made you guys come together in this creative moment?
So back in 2016, there was a film competition. It was like a 24-hour film competition, and I reached out to my brother. We had been talking about working together for a long period of time, and I was like, "Hey, let's put something together for this 24-hour film festival." And we were trying to come up with some ideas, and then we came up with this idea to do a film that about, honestly, things that we can relate to, specifically what we saw, the injustice that was happening with, police brutality at that point in time. At that point in time, my brother was like, I know, we want to get into this 24-hour festival, but this is bigger than that. So let's really take our time, think about it, and present it the right way. So we took time, we came up with the concept for P.O.V, and then that's how it kind of came together.
So, Brother Joseph, how do you pronounce your first name?
Guyiaud. So give a little, give a lot, Guyiaud.
Guyiaud.
Yeah, you got it. You got it, Munson.
Yeah, I destroy names.
G is cool as well. Give.
Guyiaud. No, the name like Munson Steve. Believe me, bro. They go Munson Steve. They've destroyed the name before. Put IEY. There's no IEY near my name.
We're in there.
Please, I'm proud of all. Once I know you, Guyiaud. I'd be able to say it and get it down. So, a little practice, destroy it every now and then, but not intentionally. P.O.V. Is that what P.O.V. means? Point of view?
Perception of violence. So it's a double. It has double meaning. It definitely is point of view, but it's also perception of violence. So the film is centered around seeing these three different individuals' perspective. So you see the perspective of the young African-American youth, you see the perspective of the Caucasian police officer, and you see the perspective of my brother, who is one of the leads, the other African-American police officer.
So Guyiaud is a star.
Yes, he is.
Guyiaud is an actor too. Okay.
Yes, a creative, I like to call myself.
I'm whatever people call themselves. I get emails and they got his, him. I'm peace.
Indifferent. Yeah. I trust me, I understand in this day and age.
No, I'm just for guys say I'm creative. I'm cool with all of it. See, because I want people to be where they are and meet them where they are. As our community needs more creatives, so I'm with it.
That we definitely do.
Yeah. So we come up with this perception of violence.
Yep.
Why do we? You're gonna say something?
Yeah, no, I was gonna say. So originally, we wanted to be able to show all the. We're fortunate, and where we come from. We're from Linden, New Jersey, and it's a very diverse community. And we've had experiences both negative and positive with police officers, with law enforcement. And so we thought it was important to not just show one perspective of the individual that, the perspective of a police officer, doing a worst case scenario with a victim, but we also wanted to show how it plays on the officers that want to do right, that are standing for something, but they may have some fears, they may have some issues when it comes to a hierarchy and when it comes to just following and being in line with the procedures of that particular district or that particular unit. So it was important for us. That's why at one point we thought of it's important to see each of these people's point of views, but we wanted it to be more than that. So that's why we also have perception of violence, which is it's up to the person's eye to see if they really understand. If one thing comes across as being violent or being a thug or being a negative, when in reality it's more neutral. So we thought it was important to show those different sides and to show how one thing could be interpreted by a police officer that has a negative stigma. Meanwhile, another officer that has a positive stigma by an African-American male sees it and reacts in a different way.
Super. Well, why don't we give our audience a moment to watch, and then we'll come back and discuss what they've seen.
Okay.
Cool?
All right.
Let's go.
All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, from Guyiaud and David, Joseph, the Joseph brothers. We've got a phenomenal creative process and expression on perception of violence. Let's watch.
Charlemagne the God here with another news report. Now, we all been watching the news and we see what's going on. America is in turmoil. The civil rights movement happened over 40 years ago, but it seems things are worse today than they were back then. Situation between African Americans and police continues to escalate as African American shootings by police continues to rise. So who's to blame? Is it the officer's fault that when they see a black man, they seem to be trigger happy? Why aren't they able to de-escalate the situations? And now officers have become targets by radicals who seek retribution. So the question is, what are we supposed to do? How do we make a change, even with a black president? The black man in America is calling for help, but who's listening? Who's coming to their aid? What happens when an unarmed black man is shot and killed? The precedence that is set is one where generally the officer is put on a paid leave. So what are we as a nation to do? How do we solve this problem that seems to be directly affecting our urban communities? Shit. Honestly, I don't know. And the way things are going, it doesn't seem to be an end in sight. But it starts with acknowledging the problem and then coming together to figure out a solution collectively. Ultimately, mistakes do happen, and the majority of police officers wearing the badge are good cops. However, there are instances where excessive force used is unwarranted. I don't know how we're gonna fix this problem, but it's one America as a whole needs to acknowledge. So wake up, because it's a war going on outside, and the black man ain't safe from nobody.
All cars be on the lookout for a black male aged 15 to 20 years old, approximately 5'7", wearing a black sleeveless hoodie and a black baseball cap. The assailant has been witnessed in multiple vehicular burglaries on Martin Luther King Boulevard. Witnesses say he is armed and dangerous. I repeat, witnesses say he is armed and dangerous.
Let's ride this out a little longer.
Copy that. You think these fucking people would find something better to do than rob cars?
What do you...
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Pull over. Hey, buddy. I need to talk to you. Hey, buddy. I said I need to talk to you. Get down on the ground right now. Stop resisting. Get down on the ground right now.
What the fuck?
Get down on the ground. Stop resisting. Get down on the ground.
What the fuck is you saying, man?
Hey, Jason, wait!
voicemail of Captain Vahandre. I'm sorry I can't take your call. Leave a detailed message and I will get back to you at my earliest convenience.
Hey, Captain. This police issue therapy, it's still ain't helping. I need to talk to you.
You know, you ain't talking much. Unfucking real.
Yeah. See it as an opportunity.
Opportunity for what?
To make a difference. So, what was your scariest encounter?
My scariest encounter?
Yeah.
Shit. Okay. I have to say it'd be the first time I had a gun pulled on me. Before I was even a cop, back in high school. My buddy, he invited me to this party with these people. Mostly girls. A couple of guys, and as I was leaving the party, the guys pulled guns on me. Give me a phone, run them Tims, you know, shit like that. Of course, they stepped to me because I was the only white kid there, right? Right? Nearly pissed my pants.
All cars be on the lookout for a black male aged 15 to 20 years old, approximately 5'7", wearing a black sleeveless hoodie and a black baseball cap. The assailant has been witnessed in multiple vehicular burglaries on Martin Luther King Boulevard. Witnesses say he is armed and dangerous. I repeat, witnesses say he is armed and dangerous.
Let's, ride this a little longer.
Copy that. You think these fucking people would find something better to do than rob cars?
What do you...
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Pull over. Yeah. Hey, buddy. I need to talk to you. Hey, buddy. I said I needed to talk to you. Get down on the ground right now. Stop resisting. Get down on the ground right now.
Witnesses say he is armed and dangerous. I repeat, witnesses say he is armed and dangerous.
Gun at me, man. Man, hold on.
Jason, wait!
They shot that boy for no reason.
That was some old racist bullshit. That was some old racist bullshit.
No justice, no peace.
You saw that shit, man. Kill that boy.
No justice, no peace.
Murderer.
No justice, no
Yo, he didn't
peace.
deserve to die.
They shot that boy for no reason.
No justice, no peace.
Kill that boy.
Come on, son, we gonna be late.
Word, man. I ain't trying to be late over your pregame ritual. Man, I ain't gonna be saying that when I put down food.
Yeah, whatever, man. Just go.
All right, go ahead, man. Catch up.
All right.
Hurry up, man. I'm gonna teach these kids something to do today.
nigga from Chicago, about to heat the city up and make it feel like Cabo. Yeah. Watch these niggas try and take my shine. I told these foolies hard work and it'll come in time. For now, just watch me tell my vision on your television. On MTV and 106 and some of the freshest fits. But I ain't focused on these clothes, I got some goals to hit. Finish the album, then I'm working on the movie script. Kenny, I got you, and these niggas say they narcissistic. My Guyiaud got one card that'll take your bitch. No stacks is needed, undefeated, we ain't losing shit. Bitch, I got options, so I'm copping if I'm choosing it. Yeah, oh man, look at me. I'm becoming everything I wish I'd be. I got bitches, I got cake. Wake up every day and I say God is great. God is great. God is great. See the watch, see the chain, you know that God is great. God is great. God is great. Even when these niggas hate, God is great. God is great. God is great. See the watch, see the chain, you know that God is great. God is great. God is great. Even when these niggas hate, God is great. God is great.
Just let the credits go for a little while.
I be that young nigga from Chicago, about to heat the city up and make it feel like Cabo. Yeah. Watch these niggas try and take my shine. I told these foolies hard work and it'll come in time. For now, just watch me tell my vision on your television. On MTV and 106 and some of the freshest fits. But I ain't focused on these clothes, I got some goals to hit. Finish the album, then I'm working on the movie script. Kenny, I got you, and these niggas say they narcissistic. My Guyiaud got one card that'll take your bitch. No stacks is needed, undefeated, we ain't losing shit. Bitch, I got options, so I'm popping if I'm choosing it. Yeah, oh man, look at me. I'm becoming everything I wish I.
Yeah.
That is good. That is great.
So, that was a piece of the film. I think you skipped through a little bit of it, but you got an opportunity to see the cops' perception, not so much so the youth's perception, but got the gist of the story. With that said, at the end, all those names were individuals who died from, police. Whatever.
Unarmed African Americans that were shot by police
officers between the end of when we first came up with the idea 2015 and 2016. July 6th, Philando Castile was the last one, which is actually the week that we shot the film. At that point in time, we were actually discussing having to put the film on hold just because of issues we were dealing with production. And then when that incident happened, when he was shot and killed with his 4-year-old daughter in the back seat with his girlfriend, it kind of just pushed us to the point of like, we have to figure this out and we have to do this because it's bigger than us. Fast forward 3 years later, this is still an issue like it was like it was when we first did the film, like it was when Rodney King was here. Like it's been an issue for us since, we've been here. So, yeah.
Yeah, I would say, yeah. I think they're asking the video jump, because I definitely did. I was trying to enjoy the whole ride. So I was just riding with the film. So I don't know if it's a different version, but definitely appreciate the creativity. For you, and just as young Black men, what do you think this uprising is saying? Obviously, you're saying it as creators too, but now you've created this microorganism that is speaking to the consciousness of our people. What are you saying as creators? I'll ask David, since your name's on the film first, what are you saying? Because you've created this new microorganism that is touching the souls of people.
So what we're saying is that, number one, we understand that, again, going back to the point of the film being called Perception of Violence, we understand that all of these are based on how we all perceive things. With that said, to me, it's very clear that this country has a huge problem. Racism, injustice, in terms of how we choose who is policing us. There's this movement behind defunding police. And I do think that should happen to some extent. At the same time, I don't believe that all police officers have bad intentions. And in that same breath of saying that, I also feel that policing should happening from people within the community, by the community. It shouldn't be happening from people who do not know the neighbors, who don't know everybody in the community, coming into your community, telling you how you should and shouldn't act. It shouldn't be coming from people who are afraid of you or see you as a target or see you as somebody who is a threat to them. How can you properly police me if you're afraid of me? It doesn't make sense to me. With that said, also understanding that there is a segment of officers who are racist and who have negative intentions. There's, in any field that you go into, there's good apples and there's bad apples. But being a police officer is not a field that, the same way if you're a doctor, you can't be an okay surgeon. You can't be, you have to be 100% all the time. And it's the same thing when you're a police officer. You are there to serve and protect, and you have people's lives in your actual control. Whether they live or die is in your actual control. So you can't be an 85 or 75% good cop. You have to be 100% all of the time.
The margin of error is much smaller, and what's acceptable for error is a lot smaller as a police officer. What we should accept as error or as being a negative person or fault or whatever it is, it has to be a lot slimmer because there's so much that you have. What you have to do for the public is such a weight. It's so much more important, and you're coming in contact with so many individuals. The original question you asked was, as young Black creatives, how do we feel with what's happening now, and how do we think that it's what we've been waiting for? Or I personally think this is long overdue. I think it's the perfect storm that's allowed us to have, and not just as Black creatives, but just as a people, as the minorities in this country, whether that's Black, Spanish, it's allowed us an opportunity. Black, Latin, and any minority in this country, right? I feel like it's allowed us to kind of hold the light on the issues that are oppressing, that are really targeting this country. A prime example, Washington's football team was the Redskins, right? It's been over 40, 50 years that Native Americans have protested this name, and yet no change has been done. But now it's the perfect storm. People are at home. They're able to be more attentive to what's happening. They're able to raise their voice. They're able to be more active. And I think all these different things, all these different elements allow us to now use our voice and kind of be more collectively together. And we had a level of cohesiveness as a people, as a culture, back in the time of Martin Luther King, back in the time of Malcolm X. We had figures that were able to bring us together. But with time, and as those figures were assassinated or somehow removed from their position, we kind of lost that. And everybody, it was kind of like, everyone was kind of all over. But now we have social media to help unify us and to kind of help strengthen us and highlight all these instances that show an unfair, biased treatment to minorities in this country, African American, Hispanic, Latino, the gamut. So I think it's well overdue, and I think that it's still nothing. It's nothing near what we deserve and what we have coming for us. If you compare and look at the Holocaust and you look at the reparations that the Jewish culture received for the Holocaust compared to what African Americans received for slavery, African Americans have still not received any bit of reparations, whereas Native Americans have received their reparations. They've received land. If you can show that you have, some bloodline to the Native American culture, you've received land or money. If if you were, unfortunately for them, if you had ancestry in the Holocaust, those people were properly compensated, not properly, but the government tried to do something to make amends, right? When you look at African Americans in this country, the government has never done that, and if anything, it's done the reverse. So I think
40 mules in an acre.
And yes, exactly. So I mean, I think what's happening now is still not even the tip of the iceberg of what we deserve to get to create equality. But at the end of the day, it's a start. We just can't let the gas up, and it's important for us to keep, saying Breonna Taylor, saying all these different names, and creating more and more awareness to it and change. Which awareness is one thing, but the change, not just don't give me a street name, change the ruling so that police officers are psychologically, mentally evaluated, so that police officers are properly trained on how to deal with various circumstances. An architect, a construction worker, what they have to go through to train for their profession is twice as long as a police officer. A police officer deals with domestic situations. They deal with mental, unstable mental individuals. They deal with so many different gammas, so many different facets of life, yet the amount of training that's required for a police officer is 6 months. There's, in terms of PTSD, in terms of having mental evaluation consistently, that doesn't happen in the police force. In terms of that blue wall of silence because of the police union, that prevents officers from really coming out and speaking their truth. There's so many issues with it. So I think what we're seeing is just the tip of the iceberg of what we deserve and where things are gonna go. And I'm so grateful. I mean, it's unfortunate that we have this time of COVID, but it's changed the world for, long term for the better. Even a situation like this, we're sitting having an interview with you, Munson, and we're able to, look at this film and we're able to draw more attention, and people are at home, so they're more attentive to what's happening. So I think it's just the tip of the iceberg, and I'm grateful for what's happening, but we just got to keep going and not let up the gas. Long answer, short question.
Yeah, it was a little long. It's okay. You might have been, practicing some new position and character that you're working on. So no telling. There was a psychological kind of trauma that you were discussing, I guess, as you portrayed the officer and taking drugs to, I guess, contain his mental. What were you thinking, David, when you were actually getting behind this film and seeing that character, and what was it like for you, having to portray someone who is going through that mental anguish? Start with you, Dave, because your brother has spoken. We want to hear from you, because this said, this big old letters, it said David Justice Film. So
David Joseph.
I know you're Joseph, but I was kind of keeping it light because y'all got all heavy on me.
So I mean, we
this is not as much news as I'm getting ready to watch for today.
No, I got you.
Come on, brother Joseph, help me out. Why put your stamp of approval on this creative?
So we wanted to show that the officer in my brother was dealing with PTSD. So we wanted to showcase that he wasn't comfortable with the incident, and you don't get to see it in the clip that we saw. But what actually ended up happening, obviously, the young youth got shot. From my brother's perspective, he was able to see that the youth was going for a phone. From the other officer's perspective, he thought it was an actual gun. The youth, he had his headphones on and he's listening to music. He doesn't even know what's going on. So you don't see the actual full film because you just see that it's a short. So you see up until the point where he's shot. But my brother's basically reliving this over and over, and he's seeing it through his perception. He understands the youth perception, and he understands the other officer's perception. So he's calling his captain like, hey, you guys have sent me to psychological training. This ain't helping. I don't know what it is. I'm not comfortable and I'm not okay. So that's why you see him wake up from his sleep, and that actually happens 2 other times in the film, which is how you're able to see the other perceptions. I don't know if that summarized everything that you were looking for in terms of why I got behind it, but I thought that was the perfect way for viewers and the audience to really get a grasp or understand the psychological trauma that anyone would deal with if they're in a position where they see somebody get shot and killed, knowing that that situation, number 1, could have been avoided, number 2, shouldn't have never happened, number 3, it was within their control to stop it, and then having to play the political game in the sense of, I'm a police officer, I have to be part of this blue wall of silence. I can't say how I actually feel. I can't let it be known that he shouldn't have killed that kid. I have to support him and say that it was a justified shooting, even though in my heart, I don't feel that way. And it's something that unfortunately a lot of police officers have to deal with. And if you go against the grain and you say otherwise, typically you're shunned, or you get, you know, in a situation where the police union no longer supports you and they outcast you. So it's one of those things where it's like, we get it, but we wanted the audience at home to also understand that.
All right, and you playing this character?
So for me, so we have friends that are police officers and state troopers and in the military, like high level. So I kind of had conversations with a few different people. And the funny thing is, like, one friend of mine who's a state trooper, when he read this, I actually had him read the script first, and he read it and he was like, no, this isn't right. A cop shouldn't be saying this. And then I pulled up footage from an actual incident of a young Black man being shot. And it was word for word, verbatim, the same dialogue. And when the cop pulls out the gun and says, stop resisting, before he even told him that he was under arrest. And so he said, wow, like, you're right. And the reason, and well, getting back to the PTSD thing, for me, it was important for me to kind of understand what that process was like. So I did a lot of research. You know, I understood that most PTSD victims have to take Zoloft and Paxil. So there's like 2-3 different drugs they have to take, and it has certain effects on them, helps them forget certain things and suppress some level of the physicalness. But then when it comes back 10 times as strong, these emotions and memories. So I had to kind of focus on some of the more negative memories that I had during that time and kind of, you know, bring that at the forefront, which kind of messed me up a bit because we don't realize how many memories we suppress, right? And then when you start thinking of that childhood, thinking like, oh, wow, that happened to me way back when. But the biggest thing for me was trying to represent this in a truthful way. So after reaching out to some of my friends that have had similar experiences or some type of stress, like a friend that was in the military that was overseas that actually had to go through some live, some real action and some tough times, it helped me to understand what it's like to cope with it. Especially, and the biggest thing is a lot of times it's mandated for these people to receive some level of therapy, but oftentimes they don't follow it, they refute it. And it's okay if they refute it, there's no mandate that says they have to do it, it's just offered. So we just wanted to see what it was like for the typical person who would want to possibly do more, but would be hindered by the hierarchy that says, no, you know, just relax, just try this treatment a little bit more, as opposed to addressing the elephant in the room, which is this officer shouldn't have done it. Let's take the proper action so that this officer doesn't do it again, you know? So it was an experience. It was an experience, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, Brother Joseph, David, I wasn't actually looking for a canned answer. I didn't think it was a canned answer. I was just listening. So most of my pauses are a little bit longer to allow individuals to express where they're coming from. I think the tapestry that you put together is allowing our community to see the injustice, and even Black in Blue is odd.
Yes.
There isn't a lot of Black in Blue. So when we even talk about colors, perception, for me, that was more of what I kind of focused on. like here we are with black and blue. And I think not enough brothers wear black. They put on the blue. But being black and blue seems to traumatize you just as much, because it's like assimilation into something that you know could literally cause you to have to justify something that you certainly don't believe in. And the mistreatment of our community, the over-policing of individuals, even the sanctioning of, punishment when it's a group. So it's almost like mob rule when you watch and you think about the one brother that was there for George Floyd.
And I completely agree. But and it's because of those reasons why we need to be there even more, because there's a certain segment, to your point, that's black and blue, and they forget that they're black. Like if we're not the ones who are going to step up and say that we're going to protect ourselves and we're going to take care of our community on our own, we can't expect, if we're going in there.
I think there are lots of people in our community that are assimilated.
No, I agree with you completely. But that's my point. If we're able to get assimilated and it's us, that other community they don't care. You understand what I'm saying? Like if we're,
I do. I think it's a conflict.
It is, but at the same time, I feel like we have to, every person isn't going to be good. Every cop isn't going to be bad. With that said, if we're not the ones at the forefront saying with our voices, we have to come in here and we need to make a change. We need to fight until we make that change. We can't expect anybody else to do that for us.
I'm not certain that the policies, I think from what I hear, obviously,
yeah, of course. But I mean, even
no media guy, I think when you think about how someone is indoctrinated in the military,
of course,
they say take the hill. Now there's a gun on the hill, and they say go for it. I think when people are indoctrinated, and I think we're talking about all the social change that you literally talking about, they're really working to figure out, are the teachers bad? You ain't even made it to the street. And then once you get out of the academy, they say, well, now you're going to learn what's really going on. Like unlearn it. So you've got guys that are 18, 20 years in the street telling a guy that just got to the street what the street is like. I think the entire principle behind policing is in question right now. I mean,
I completely agree, and I completely agree with you. With that being said, though, it still doesn't. There's a segment of people who come in, and they come in to change, and when they come in to make the change, typically those are the people that are getting targeted, like Raymond Edmonds, who is a police officer.
Edwin Raymond. Yes.
Edwin Raymond, who's a police officer in Brooklyn. And he saw certain things going on. He said, no, you can't do that. So what they try to do, they try to shun him. They tried to shut him up. Now he's become a public activist, and he's still a police officer who's making positive change in the community.
The first thing was, so what I'm not to cut you off, Dave, but what Dave's talking about is a police officer that's based in Brooklyn, and he actually did a documentary series that won like an Emmy called Crime and Punishment. And what happened was they were forcing him to make these arrests to get his quota together, and all the while they're saying that there's no quotas. And he would say like, well, there's nothing wrong happening. And they said, well, find a reason. So after months and months of them trying to force him and the other African-Americans and other minorities that are police officers, of them saying that they didn't have any numbers, they then started to put them in positions where they were working in areas where they were all by themselves. They didn't have any backup. They actually tried, Edwin, this officer, had some of the highest ranking numbers to become a lieutenant, but they refused to give him the promotion because he was not out there arresting people that were not doing anything wrong. So like, and all of this, he actually documented it. He actually walked with undercover cameras in the precinct and documented all of this. And now he was looked down upon. Him, it's 13 officers that came together and recorded with hidden cameras, all these situations where the lieutenants, the heads of the captains are all telling them, go out there and get numbers, because it's all about the numbers for elections and for money and politics. So when they were trying to say, this isn't right, we shouldn't be shaking down these black kids that aren't doing anything because they're forcing them to go in these neighborhoods, and he tried to raise a flag, they tried to kind of hide him and kind of try to sweep him under a rug, but he refused to do it. And that documentary wound up giving him an Emmy. So that's a prime example. He could have easily just said, okay, fine, I'm just, I wanted to make a change. They're telling me they want more arrests, they want more whatever. I'll just do what they say to get them off my back. He refused to bend. He kept his integrity. And it shows. And he was able to highlight some of these issues within policing. That's what David was trying to.
I mean, that's what I was saying without giving the full background. But he's still a police officer.
You got to tell somebody because they're not watching, and I clearly didn't know the guy.
Okay, yeah. And I mean, he's currently still a police officer.
Wearing that uniform and being black, period.
Yeah, it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. It was never sanctioned for real policing or public safety. See,
I mean, the whole concept of policing itself comes from getting back slaves.
No, I'm just saying. So for me, it's kind of like part of what I hear when the concept is it public safety or is it policing? Because I'm really not so strong on the policing as close as I am to the public safety.
Public safety, which is a whole nother thing.
It's kind of like public health and medicine. They seem to not go together. I got disparity. Got a little disparity here, Coach. I think there's some issues as it relates to policing and public safety, and even for our community, there's always a question because you really got to pause when you get ready to call the police on a brother or sister because it could end badly. You're like, well, maybe we should really give them a pass today because it is really. They were just setting off fireworks and they burning up the trash can, but we call the police. They might cars. They might arrest somebody who really, got a warrant in the community who wasn't even putting on the fire. It's just a bad situation. I think that those are the things that, to me, when I watch the film, the conflict of being a brother, black and blue, sounded even louder than perspectives, even though, perceived violence. I was perceiving the colors because for me, that's how it was made. When I was in the store, I was really like the bodega. You really, unless you're in the eastern part, then you really don't see it. And then y'all, because I live in Chicago and Atlanta, we only let two in the store on a corner at a time. So like kind of in the East, y'all got everybody behind the thing. And in Chicago, particularly in the South Side, you're going to wait outside and it's going to be one of y'all at a time. Because it just ain't going down like that. Like it's a whole other role. So, and I'm sure there are places in the East, so I'm not comparing, but y'all, he just wandered in. I was like, wow, that was cool, No glass. They didn't have no glass. Wow, that was a nice bodega he was in. But I love the way you shot it and the colors came out because it made me think a lot of youth just come in. He smiles at the young girl. His mind. I could see Trevon I just got it. I did it. I got something to eat. Got some gum, whatever. Iced tea, I'm on my way and I'm listening to my music and I'm oblivious that there is someone who really is set out to do something violently to me that I never met. Like I don't even know you. And all of a sudden we meet and it's a bad introduction and ends poorly. I think that's what we've learned, that the capacity for people who in the name of the police could actually do something. And I think it's a challenge for those who are in blue that are black to have the time to make change. Because the one thing about change is it's not so automatic. They still really haven't brought the killers of Breonna Taylor to justice.
Yeah. It's a lot of work.
not only haven't they brought them, it doesn't seem like they're even making an attempt. Like, it's one thing to say, you know, we're in an investigation process. It's another thing to be incomplacent or to be irresponsible. At this point, it's surpassed any irresponsibility, because the red flag to me has been raised so much, especially with all the events that have happened in the past 6 weeks, that at this point it should have been like, just so we can show that we understand and hear the outcry, let's say something. It's been silence.
I think that when we thought about Ahmaud Arbery, nobody knew who that brother was.
No.
He was in the ground by the time we had.
Over a month in the ground.
Yeah, his mother literally imagined that her son was a criminal when he was put in the ground. I mean, she was sold something that was not even near true.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how disgusting that circumstances are. So with Breonna, you're not surprised, because the implications are numerous as to that injustice. It's not one.
Yeah.
Shooters, they're the individuals that actually signed the paperwork. It's the fact that it may or may not have been the right location. I mean, that's a whole lot of
so many layers
and misses. So when you even put a lens on it, and then you say they're in what state?
Of course, yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like that was South Georgia.
Yeah.
That wasn't
deep.
That wasn't ATL or something just happened to the Joseph brothers. You know, that was a whole. You know, it wasn't. Oh, it's a Spelman and a Morehouse guy getting tased in a car in the city of Atlanta. No, we're not doing that. That's automatically wrong. We don't even have to be. We're not even going for that. They were able to pull the whole conspiracy out and cover up.
Cover it up completely.
And then only after the attention of the nation started to shine a light. You know, we don't have enough light right now. We're still waiting on some more light. You know, nobody brought us the real video from inside. You know,
still haven't seen it.
You know, we really don't have the light. Only when we get light can we at least see the injustice. That's what really brought George Floyd to life. I mean, the fact that there was a video of Ahmaud Arbery. I mean, those are the things, and I see even your film. That's why, to me, the color of the officer wearing blue was such a contradiction, and it's a mental contradiction. I don't know that even if somebody isn't shot and you're wearing blue and you're having to tolerate the injustice on your people on a regular basis, if it isn't numbing to some degree.
Yeah, it has to be. Otherwise, you would lose it. You would lose it. The first officers black officers that were ever hired were not allowed into the precinct. And when I did my research for this, it hurt me to learn some of this information. You know, like it's like you're taking a circle and you're trying to make it work as a rectangle in this machine. You're taking a cog that should work one way and you're completely eradicating its use and trying to force it to do something else. So the research that I did when I was looking up police officers, African American police officers in this country and how it's come about, it was just sad. And when the first black police officers could not give any infraction to any person, any white person in this country. If they did, it was complete. It could be thrown out just as quickly, you know. So it just, like as you're saying, Munson, it speaks volumes. That was another thing that we did talk about, but in our opinion, it was like we felt like if the viewer should be attentive to that, because even in the police car, like when you're listening to him talk and you're listening to him talk about, you know, what's your scariest experience, and he's telling him when he got his boots took from some black, and so you're seeing how the white person reacts and how he's more aggressive towards the black counterpart, but the black officer has to just be complacent and be quiet and just be a good little boy and not raise alarm, you know. So you're 100% right.
Yeah, no, I thought the idea of the guy really wanting to get, he had a resentment where you wrote that in. He had a resentment.
Yeah, he had a preconceived biases based on his own experiences that you can perceive as racism or not racist or what happened to him. But we left it to the viewer to make that decision.
Well, I don't know if you left it to the viewer. Clearly, the dude, he had a moment, and
yeah,
he had a moment. He felt victimized, and I think that when people talk about biased, I think that there's also the question of emotional state. Like I saw the emotional state that you were in, Brother Joseph.
I like Brother Justice.
No, I'm
good name. It's a good name.
Thinking of David Justice with that baseball hat over there, but who played here in Atlanta. But the idea, literally, of brothers suffering through what you guys put together is incredible. I mean, I think the idea that your white guy, when we say they have a bias, I think they have resentments. I think they have emotional states that isn't just a bias. I think they're emotional words like jealousy. So jealousy plays a role,
I mean, look at George Floyd.
Yeah, right. But
that's literally the perfect example. They both work together at the same club. They can say that they didn't know each other, but if you know anything about bouncing at a club, you deal with the police officers outside if you're inside the security. So there's no way possible that he did not know him.
Well, not to cut you off, Dave, but Munson, you brought up a really good point. So I just want to say two things. For one, it is jealousy. It's a jealousy, but then even for the people that haven't had experience with African Americans, it's biased because subconsciously all the perception of African Americans that they may have seen in TV when they're not around African Americans is that of this guy's a thug, he's a killer. Like the perception that they see on mass media is more negatively skewed. So even if you haven't had personal experience to make you jealous or to make you negative, to feel negative, what you've been told and you've been hearing and you've seen at the forefront subconsciously makes you feel like this guy's gonna rock, right? But then when you take it further back in this country's history, you look at the reason why I'll be getting heavy quick. But if you look at the reason why marijuana even became illegal, and you look at the history of it, marijuana with jazz music, marijuana became illegal because jazz musicians were known for smoking reefer, and they were trying to stop the white women and white men from going in these jazz clubs, the Cotton Club in Harlem and all these different places. And that's what initially pushed them to make marijuana illegal so that they could cause a divide and keep Black people away from. So there's a level of jealousy in that as well. They did not like the fact that that women that were Caucasian or primarily Caucasian, because that's what was coming in Harlem, would go after these jazz musicians, and they did not appreciate that at all. And that turned into them specifically targeting the African-American community when it came to marijuana. Meanwhile, all these other drugs that were being used got life sentences, did not cause an issue, and so I think you're 100% right. There's a jealousy that was there that caused them to say, no, this guy is dating a white woman, that's a problem. Or, these guys are playing music in Harlem and they're having a great time, that's a problem, So I think the jealousy is definitely a big issue.
But my question with bias is emotional language. Like, I don't want to let people off on emotional language. When you fear me, then you go into your subconscious to begin to tell me and explain to yourself, and you say you have a bias. When you fear me, the emotional language is you are afraid of me, or you hate me. You don't just dislike me, you hate me. So when they say a bias, people get a pass. You're not unfamiliar. You know what kindness is. You know what humanity is. Your lack of humanity is forged in hate. Your lack of humanity is forged in insecurity. So people have found and coined words like bias. But for me, I know that our community needs to be real clear with people when they either hate us because they don't employ us, they either hate us because they choose other terms and conditions by which we're hired, given loans. You know, these are beyond biases. These are intentional, harmful things to reduce wealth in our country, to create and make us feel as though psychologically we should be in a neighborhood where it is a payday loan, a liquor store. I mean, literally, when you think of this, the bias just gives people outs. You need to speak in emotional languages so that they too can begin to judge themselves from a humanistic standpoint. Because your bias doesn't take you away from being kind. Children know if they're going to share a toy. The lack of being able to share economics, the lack of even just letting a little kid go. I mean, why do you care? He ain't running. Why is your gun out? You know, when you think about the fact of I'm asleep at the wheel, you can wake me up. You can just take my
in a parking lot.
In a parking lot. You can take my keys. I'm sitting, my seat at the table. I'm just in society.
And then you kill him.
What happened is I took your gun.
I took your taser. I didn't even take your gun.
I took your taser. And I got away from both of you guys. And by now I'm knowing, because I just saw it, for 8.46 seconds, I literally saw what you would do to me given the opportunity. So I'm gonna get out of here because I can see and I can sense, Spidey sense, you know, brother Joseph, Spidey sense, that this is not going good. I can tell, I express to you, and you can see from how I'm talking that this is not my present situation. I really want to get home to my family. And you can just take my keys, take my car. But this isn't going to end well because you're getting a little bit intense, and I see that. So now I got my flight senses on, like every other brother.
Fight or flight.
I clearly don't want to fight because y'all are armed.
Yep.
I need to attempt to outrun this injustice. Because y'all literally, the sergeant, y'all probably didn't call him to say, you found me sleeping. Now you're intimidated. Everybody has seen you been outmaneuvered.
And you're embarrassed.
And you're totally beyond embarrassed.
Yeah, how dare you?
You have gotten punked. You got punked by a guy who was asleep, and it was two of you. When you got an ego, and it's not going to end well, the guy takes off. He got to go.
Yeah.
Who's going to wait around? And you just saw George Floyd.
Even what I've seen George Floyd, you just embarrassed this cop. That ego by itself is
not one.
Not one, but two.
But what I'm saying is,
so now you know. Here it is. You did it in front of my friend.
And the ego is not going to let it go, even before the other thoughts. Just the fact, oh, I'm the person in power. I tell you, like, you're going to do that? Oh no, it's not even a thought.
Yeah.
So
I think there's such a contradiction emotionally for the change, and still we're gonna need brothers and sisters in blue, and encourage more brothers and sisters to wear blue, which is and protect them when they're wearing blue.
Yes.
That's a real quagmire for all who are attempting to make change and be present. And that's kind of present now.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed the short film. I enjoyed your creativity.
Thank you.
David, I know that this is a very difficult thing, so I applaud you for what you've done, making a film, period, long or short, that deals with social justice and social change, needs to be applauded. We at Seat at the Table really appreciate you at least giving a slice of your vision. Look forward to seeing more films from the Joseph brothers. I'm sure we got more on the horizon. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes.
We have a few projects that we're actually working on right now.
Good. Well, I want to thank you for coming. It's been a wonderful expression of creativity from the creative Joseph brothers. I am Munson Steed, and we want to thank you guys for really coming on, because it makes a difference on how many of us can look to what you've done and know that they're young brothers telling stories that will at least inspire and challenge society to see the truth. So thanks so much for coming on Rolling Out, Seat at the Table.
Well, thank you. And I just want to end and say this. We wanted this film to create a dialogue. We wanted it to create a conversation, one that unfortunately for too long just hasn't happened. And we're happy to see that the film has done that, and even the current conversation that's taking place just in America, because people are starting to finally open their eyes and realize, like, oh, this is really their reality. This is really not right. And really just understanding African American and minorities' plight. So in that regard, we're really happy about it. And anybody, if you haven't seen the full film, you can go on YouTube, type in Perception of Violence, take a look at it. We would love to get
FilmPOV.com.
FilmPOV.com. And again, thank you for having us. We really do appreciate it. It's been a pleasure.
We're proud of you, brother. David Joseph. We're very proud of you guys, and I want you always to continue to create. I think it's training for many communities. I think definitely for communities that are working to bring, this is something I could see people using as a training tool.
When we first did the film, that was one of the things we were doing. We were doing an actual tour with it, where we were screening it in communities and having dialogue between police officers and local community members in terms of how they can effectively work together to create this barrier or break the barrier between the police officers and people within the community. We started that, weren't able to sustain it, but it's something that we've been working towards actually starting back up and continuing to do work with.
Well, you know, young entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs of color, you know, you'll grow and learn as all of us do, and you just stay on your path and your purpose.
Of course.
And that is sustainability. Sometimes you gotta pause just to catch your breath and get to the next set of circumstances. So, you know, much respect for just being there for the community, period. Because now you've created, you know, this is just one piece of the body of work that y'all will create moving forward.
Exactly.
And make sure you get my poster right next time, and P.O.V. poster in there. So I appreciate you guys. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Munson Steve. It's a pleasure rolling out. Thank you.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you.
So all of you out there, there's tons we can do. We've said you do not have to be in the street, but you must be in the struggle. This is Munson Steed. You've been watching the Joseph Brothers. Go check out P.O.V. on YouTube or FilmPOV.com. So want you to go out and support these brothers. They have definitely given us something to consider. And if nothing else, it's a conversation for those who are uncertain about what and how they can share creativity and create conversation around this policing. It is not easy. There'll be definitely trials and tribulations as we continue to move forward. But each of us deserve a seat at the table to make a difference in this community and to get our equitable share of the economy, of peace, and of course, all those things guaranteed by our Constitution here in these United States. I'm Munson Steed, and thank you so much for joining me at a seat at the table.